But whilst that's happening, I thought I could introduce Madeline Winter and myself. So my name is Joshua Whiffen. I work for Randwick City Council with Communities and Family. We strive to provide lots of different things for the community. And one of the projects we do run is the Parenting Calendar, which operates in partnership with a number of different organisations to deliver programs and workshops such as this for the community of the Randwick City LGA. So today we've got our starting school well for 5 to 12 years with Madeline Winter. So this is aimed at parents who have children starting preschool and primary school next year in 2022. Obviously a very necessary thing considering all the things we've had to go through this year. I think it's great that we are able to provide such a thing and assist where possible. So, as I said, this is Madeline Winter, and she's presenting for Randwick City Council, and she has her own business, Hand in Hand Parenting with Madeline Winter, and she's a parent coach with over 20 years experience. Is that correct, Madeline?
That's right.
That's right. So just a little bit of parent housekeeping. There will be a post-attendee questionnaire at the end of the workshop, so at the end of the webinar. So when you log off, it should bring up a questionnaire for you to fill out. And the aim of this is to get a bit of an idea about the sort of things you'd like to see moving forward if you've enjoyed this workshop and if you'd like to see more, or what sort of different things you'd like to see as well. But what I'll do without further ado, I think I'll hand over to Madeline and she will be able to present. And just as you go, obviously you aren't able to interact, but we do have the chat function, and if you have any questions as we go, do put your questions into the chat and then I'll present them to Madeline at the end. So over to you, Madeline.
Thank you, Joshua. I'm Madeline Winter. This is starting school. Well, I realised that I needed to change it to starting school with confidence. It was billed as starting school well, but in a pandemic, I thought that might be a little bit confusing. I'm not going to be much help to you about how to keep your child well, but we can do some work together figuring out how to have the start of school be a positive experience. For those of us in Australia, that will be in February. There's a few people I had contact with who are from elsewhere, and the issues are very similar. So regardless of where you're at in the school year, you're probably not that far off starting if you're in a part of the world that has started in the last little while, and many of the issues will be similar. So I like to start here, which is the truth about you. You are a good parent, and you have always done the very best that you can. We parents feel it's such a struggle to feel proud of our parenting and good about our parenting, because our struggles end up coming out in the direction of the young ones, that we care about most. So it's a tough gig, but you have always done the very best that you can. You face real challenges and difficulties, and you're not to blame for these. So the pandemic is one of those. It's where school actually is one of those, where big forces from outside that you don't have a lot of control over, if any control over, come to a pointy end land with a pointy end in your family, where you're trying to navigate them and make sense of them in the privacy of your own home, in the intimacy of the relationships that are most important to you. But a lot of the difficulty is that you didn't ask for this and you're having to try and tackle it, often without a lot of information or resource. So that it is hard is not your fault. and someday you will get a little rest. And here's, there's a couple of photos of my husband in here. One of them's, this is an older photo. So this is his favorite thing to do when we visit our friends. So there you go. And just to start off, I would like to acknowledge country and show my respect to the traditional custodians of the land on which I am currently sitting and where I live and where I work, all in one place these days. And they're the Wongal Aboriginal people of the Eora Nation here in my part of the world. They're elders, past and present. And I think it's worth acknowledging that they kept this land really well for a really long time, and that Indigenous culture survives and thrives, and that we who are not Indigenous benefit from what they have lost. So you're on silent, as is often the case with a webinar. Josh is my assistant. If you need help, use the chat function. We will have questions at the end, so send your messages to the host, and if we have time, we will have a look at those at the end. I don't think it is the Q&A in this instance, it's the chat. And we are hoping to have a recording afterwards, and we'll send you links to that and to a bunch of resources that I provide. If for some reason you don't get that email, do contact me at madelinewinter.com and I can send it to you. But I would love to hear from you, and I'm hoping that between Joshua and I, we can get it out. One of the things that I like to offer is a free 20-minute consultation. It's hard to know where to start sometimes. It's hard to know where the best resources are, and I can head you in the right direction, and we can figure out what the next steps are in a handy 20 minutes. So feel free to take up that offer. Get in touch with me. So what I'd like to talk to you today is about your special role as a parent in helping your child through starting school. I'd like to talk about the challenge and the importance of keeping and staying connected with your child. And I talk about an emotional backpack. So the connection part is about packing the backpack. And then I want to talk a little about handling upsets, which are good, it turns out, even though they often feel really hard. So I call that, oh, I've got a typo there. I call that unpacking the backpack. So you need to pack it in the morning with connection and unpack it often in the afternoon with whatever feelings it is that your child brings home. And talk a little bit about getting support for you through this process. Starting school is a really big transition. So you need help. It's good to get help. I'll talk a little about hand-in-hand parenting, which was founded by a woman called Patty Wipfler in the US. It's all around the world now. We teach a number of what we call listening tools. There are several which are between adults, parents, and children. They don't have to be parents, but it's especially important for parents. And those tools are around balancing what I would call connection with correction. So I'll talk a bit about connection, but basically we teach some play, tools for play, to build your relationship with your child, which is what will carry them through challenging experiences. And on the other side of that triangle is the idea of correction, which is limit setting. So we understand that setting limits is important. It's every day. And often children test limits because they're carrying emotional tension in their backpack. And setting limits is best seen as a way of getting a child back on track when they've gone off track, and they've gone off track because their brain is full of feelings and they're not thinking. So that's how limits are understood, and it's helpful to understand the school experience and your relationship to school in these terms. I'll talk about that a bit more. And then at the bottom of the triangle, the thing that is really important is that you get some support. Parenting is emotional work. It's challenging in ways most of us were unprepared for. And you really need space where you can offload how you feel about it, where people understand what the problem is and what your challenge is, and where you have a place to plan and think about the challenges in your family without fear of judgment or criticism. And I offer that kind of support to parents as a parent coach. In particular, I run parent support calls, which I think are quite wonderful. They're a chance where you meet with a very small group of people. And I try to keep it to 4 for an hour-and-a-half call, where we run through each person's challenges, which I call the problem-solving part of the session. And then we organise what we call listening time, which is a time in that group to talk about what's really going on. We make sure it's very confidential. And what you get in that is some perspective. One of the things about parenting is that it's very isolated in the way that it's been organised in most of our cultures. And we often struggle with feeling like we're the only one. And we forget that one of the big reasons it's hard is because we're handling big things that are coming into our family from outside. And when you're in a group of other parents who are able to be honest about what's going on, you really get a perspective that's really, really helpful as a parent, that it's your responsibility, but it is not your fault. And you have these challenges in common with others. There's not some thing you failed to figure out because there's something wrong with you. It's because there isn't enough help, there isn't enough support, and it's hard. And I like this little series of slides. We all make mistakes, and generally it's with the best of intentions. We don't intend, we get tense and tight, but even then, our best heart would not want to hurt our children. And just like this little duck, sometimes we don't quite plan well enough for what the challenge is. So this poor darling has lost her little duckling. So what I aim to do here is to help you avoid and, hang on, let's go back one. Help you avoid and to recover from your parenting fails. A little bit about me. This is a rather slightly younger version of my husband and a very much younger version of my child. I've done all sorts of different things, and eventually, better late than never, became a parent. I had thought that it would really close my life down, and it profoundly opened it up. It's by far the best thing I've ever done. And I've been working with this parenting approach for over 30 years, initially with other people's families and then in my own. And that inspired me to you start sharing these tools with people very quickly. So somehow or other I ended up teaching. And my daughter's now 17, and she always knew what to do. I didn't have to teach her how to make use of these tools for offloading feelings, for connecting, and for recovering good thinking. So she just knew how to do it, and that affirmed my sense that this was worth spending my time sharing with other people. And teaching it also lets me connect with other parents in a way that's really good for my parenting. So I'm here for myself. So on to the topic at hand. in order to learn well, children need to feel safe and wanted. That sense is fundamental. Not much else can happen if young ones don't feel that. In order for that to happen, in general, young ones will need a lot of physical closeness and connection. I think I was really shocked becoming a parent. I hadn't had a lot to do on a daily basis with little ones before I had my own, and it's so physical. It still is, but it's such a physical relationship, and young ones want to be in physical contact with other people. Young people need to play. Play, it's no, what's the word? It's not a sort of trite thing to say that play is the language of young people. It's one of the ways that young ones will learn about the world, process what they're experiencing, and show you what's going on for them. They generally won't come, and little ones won't come and hold your hand and say, today I had a hard day, the teacher yelled at me. They'll often come home and they may choose to play it out. I remember talking to a mother recently whose little one started school last year or earlier this year, insofar as anyone started school this year, but almost immediately the little girl was playing school at home. Mum had to be the student, and she had the teddy bears all lined up, and school, she was the teacher. That process of playing through an experience from the position of being the person in charge of it, that's really important. And that's one of the things that helps a child, builds resilience and helps a child work through the tensions that they carry and that they accumulate. And it's something you can help your child with. Young ones also need what I like to call relaxed high expectations. Generally, as young people, we were met with tense high expectations. It's hard on young people when we don't expect enough of them, but we need not to be tense about that. We need to hold it out in a hopeful, encouraging way, but it's really important. When people run discouragement at young ones, when they're disappointed in them or don't expect enough of them, it's hard on them. Young ones need to make freedom to make mistakes, which is sometimes tricky in a school environment. That's how we learn. They need a sense of respect and fairness. And they most importantly need a place where their feelings are understood and listened to. We parents are real big on trying to fix things up when our kids have emotional struggles, and there's sometimes things that really need fixing, and around school there are sometimes things that really need fixing. But one of the most important things we can do is learn how to really listen well to our children when they get home and before they head off, and they can keep handling and figuring stuff out if we do that well enough. Yeah, I may get a chance to talk a bit more later about our fix-up pattern as parents, but listening is hugely powerful, and most of us didn't get listened to nearly enough as young ones, and so we underestimate it. We don't really have a sense for ourselves of what a difference that makes. So the framework that I've come more and more to use to understand what's going on in our families and in our relationships with our children is that basically with your child, you have what I call a relationship bank balance. And the credit that you need to build and that you need to have plenty of in that bank account is connection. Connection is the thing that really makes the wheels, greases the wheels of family life. You know, there's increasing research. I'm just reading a book at the moment by a guy called Robin Dunbar about friendship and how important it is to people. And the research around how much longer people live if they have a good set of relationships is very clear. recent, I guess the pandemic for me really made clear how important just routine connection with other human beings is. But connection is what our kids really need to feel. And that's what we need to help them, top them up with. When there's not enough connection, you'll find that those are the times when there's a lot of struggle. That sometimes struggles are a sign that we need to set a limit, but as often they're a sign that our children need to feel better connected, and our limit setting goes better when our children feel well connected. Setting limits is a whole discussion in itself, and there's various places where you can find me talking about that. Plus we can have a chat about it if that's an issue in your family. But generally, if things are scratchy and difficult, it's because your child doesn't feel well enough connected. And one of the things about sending your child to school is that school tends to be, almost by virtue of the ratios of adults to children, there's really not enough adults for things to go really easily for young ones. But schools, they're just organised in a way where their focus is on the correction side of the bank balance. So there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of routines, and there's a general requirement that you just get on with it. And when our children are at various points in their life at school, and in particular in that transition from not school into school, probably made worse by the fact that many of us have spent a lot of time with our children in the last year because of the pandemic. It's going to be felt very deeply when children are moving into an environment where the focus is on basically a set of rules that are really not that negotiable. The focus very much is on limit setting. So at home, in this period, we need to compensate with connection, using child-directed play to build a child's confidence and as a way of listening to what's going on for them, and to make plenty of time for feelings. And making time is one of the things I find myself advising parents who are working towards the beginning of school. After the kind of intensity of early parenting, we're often pressed or really anxious to get back to the world where there are more adults in it if we haven't already been there. And starting school is a really big transition for young ones. And if you're not under pressure, if you've got a bit of slack to handle the upsets and take your time to manage those rather than having to run roughshod over them, everything will go easier. So if it's at all possible, my advice to parents in preparing, which if you're in Australia, you're going to have some time to do now between now and February, is to see if you can't back the pressure off around the rest of your life for a few weeks while you manage the transition. That will mean that you can you're relaxed enough to pay attention, to help your kid through the transition. So around starting school, what we're wanting to do is, parenting is actually constantly a balancing act, basically. So it depends where the pressure's coming. Sometimes it's inside the family, sometimes it's to do with something that's happened within the family, sometimes it's to do with stuff that's coming in from outside. But our job is to be constantly thinking about the balance. Around starting school, that's going to be focusing on connection at home, sending them off to school where they're going to get a lot of limit setting and correction. They come home and we want to replenish their sense of connection. That's how it will work best over this period. I want to talk a little bit about what young ones worry about as they head. There's a fair bit of research around around what kids are concerned about as they sort of head into school. And the researchers suggest that they, insofar as you can tell that someone's sort of worrying, I think they measured kids' cortisol levels, and I don't know how thorough the study was, but basically kids start worrying about it about 6 months before they start school. And it's a big deal, and they know it's a big deal. So they will, these are the research around the world suggests that one of the things that they're really worried about, and I remember this being such an issue, is where are the toilets and can I handle the toilets? Currently internationally, the state of toilets in schools is internationally the thing that kids worry about world around. So anyway, that's kind of interesting. They'll want to know what are the rules. They're concerned with who are they going to be friends with. They're concerned with what adult cares about me in this place. And if you get a teacher who can show they're caring, it really makes a difference. They want to know, can I get to play? Play is so important, and opportunities for play generally are reduced once a kid hits school. Some schools have figured out that they need to do what's called play-based learning, but not all of them. One of the big things, especially coming out of the pandemic, is that our children will be missing us and will have big feelings about separation. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And they're concerned about whether they can manage things on their own. Actually, in general, I don't think they're as worried about that as their teachers are. Teachers are very preoccupied with whether the kids can manage things independently, because of course there's one teacher and if you're lucky 20 kids, 16 kids, 20 kids more maybe, and they really can't cope with it. The teacher can't handle it well if there's 16 kids who can't put their sweater on or their jumper on. So I would categorize those things into the need for information, firstly, feelings around connection and separation, general challenges of feeling, and the need for play. So information, connection, feelings, and play. So I'll talk about each of those in turn. Information is what schools are really good at helping you with in general. If we need to understand that for those of us who are sending our children to school for the first time, it's a really big learning curve for us. And for our kids, they've never done it before. And I think it's easy for us to forget what it's like to go into an experience that you've never done before. We are using our previous experience as a point of reference all the time. So it's a big deal for them. So it's good for you to get as much information you can and be giving them as much information as possible to attend anything that's happening at the school. If you can figure out how to get together with other families from the school beforehand so the kids have a sense of each other a little if they don't already have that. Doing some practice runs where you're not actually under pressure to get them there, so that, because just the logistics of the beginning of school is often just a huge challenge. Plus, little ones like to sleep. My experience was the whole business of just getting up and getting there, and schools tend to be a bit tense. I don't know why they can't just be a little bit more relaxed about dribbling into school in that first period, but they tend not to be, and it's tough. So managing the logistics, the lunch, the backpack, etc. So schools will tend to give you information about where the toilets are. They'll tell you about what to pack for lunch, and all of this is useful. They'll tell you about the need to label clothes, and they'll talk about what they think will help your child be independent in that environment. They'll talk about quite specific sort of tasks that they would really like children to be able to manage. Managing their clothes, managing toileting, managing getting their shoes on and off, managing getting their lunch in and out of their lunchbox. They'll often tell you, don't give your child a complicated lunch. It's tricky. Don't give them packets they can't open. So schools will be big on all that stuff. And it's really important. All those little moments of stress where a child's trying to navigate that without enough adult help really make it harder. So those things are worth paying attention to. The thing that school probably won't talk to you about when you're in the process of that, all that sort of, you know, preschool information sessions, is the importance of connection. This is where you come in. Children really love to learn. They're learning machines. They learn how to speak at least one language by the time they're 2.5, generally. Extraordinary capacity to learn, a constant, huge learning curve in the first, 4 or 5 years. And so if the learning environment or the learning process is stressful, it means that there's something wrong that needs attention. So they love to learn and they need connection, like they need air, food, and drink. It's that important to them. And when they feel well connected, they can actually use their thinking brain. I'm going to run through sort of these different layers, and then what I want to do is give you some just a little brief introduction to some of the listening tools that will help you achieve the connection that you're after with your child. So the next thing that schools will want your child to be able to manage, I have a problem with the idea of managing, but, oh, well, it's good. Your child does need to be able to manage feelings at school. One of them that's bigger this year than it has been other years in my experience working with parents is separation, and I'll get to talk a little bit about that. Children often experience big feelings around separation starting school, but this year I think will be way bigger because they haven't had as many opportunities in many places to be as separated from us as they would normally, and to kind of be confident in that experience of transition, and hopefully to have had chances to feel some of the feelings about separation. It is like a bucket. Feelings, the feelings that your kid is carrying around in their backpack, to use a different analogy, is like a bucket, and the more that you can drain it and the more strategically you can drain those feelings, the less there will be when they arrive at the doorstep of the classroom and you need to leave, which is a stressful time to be trying to handle feelings. So emotional tension gets in the way of learning and making friends. And when children feel disconnected, which they can have a hard time because they feel not enough connected to you, and they can have a hard time because carrying around a backpack of emotional tension disconnects them. They can't tell that we're there for them. And when a child feels disconnected, they're actually in their feeling brain. They're not in their thinking brain. We often try to appeal. A sign that a child's disconnected is that they're sort of not able to do what needs to be done. And we often try to appeal to them in that spot with reason. We try explaining why it is that what has to happen should happen, or appealing to a reasoning mind. Rewards and punishments are on the same spectrum, in that we're asking a child to have the cognitive capacity to understand what they will get if they behave the right way. And when that's a rational thinking process. And when a child is in the middle of a big funk of feelings, they can't remember that. They can't be motivated by that because they're just not connected with it. So one of the things we need to do well for young ones is help them with the build up of feelings they have, and that will help them be more relaxed in the school environment. So the deal about feelings is that stressful experiences create emotional tension, and sometimes as a parent we kind of know what those stressful experiences are, and sometimes we don't, and it sort of doesn't really matter. I think it's tricky for us to imagine what it's like to be young. We don't remember it. We had similar experiences, which sometimes makes it harder for us to be compassionate with our children and patient with them. But basically, stressful experiences create emotional tension, and that emotional tension really drives off-track behavior. So a child who just stalls and you can't quite get them out of the house and it's impossible to get them into the car seat, that's off-track behavior that is driven by some bunch of feelings. And it's great if you can figure out how to help with those feelings. The thing about feelings is that they're quite sticky. So a child who perhaps had some very frightening experience early in their life will tend to be a bit scared of all sorts of things. So the other way that feelings show up is children will have upsets about the most ridiculously small things. So that's part of a process of looking for opportunities to work through big feelings. Sometimes they can't even articulate what they're about. Many of the traumatic experiences we've had went in before there were words, very early in our life. And it's actually very difficult to put words to it. And it turns out it's not actually necessary to put words to it. But children will choose little, what we call pretexts, to have upsets. And those, you can trust that that upset is important. It's looking for a way to get out so that they can get out of their feeling brain and back into their thinking brain. And it turns out that you can take advantage of those little upsets, particularly if you're not stressed and pressured and don't have big time pressure on you. When your child gets really upset and frustrated because they can't tie their shoelaces, you can actually, rather than tying them for them, you might do that sometimes just to get out the door, but sometimes it's worth just holding out that this is a relaxed high expectation. Sweetheart, I know you can do that. I'll stay here while you do that. And if a child's looking for an opportunity to have some big feelings, those might come out around the challenge that you're holding out, that they can tie their shoelaces or they can put their jacket on or whatever. And then it turns out that stopping showing the feelings doesn't actually make them go away, unfortunately. I think we generally have this sort of mistaken view about feelings, that if we can just stop the tears, we've stopped the sadness. And the sadness just sits there and looks for another possibly little opportunity to show itself. It's really worth learning how to help our children process their feelings, really, unload them so their backpack isn't quite so heavy. One of the big feelings that young ones are up against when heading into school, and as I said, I think this is going to be much bigger this year, are feelings around separation. And I actually call this an emotional project for young ones. It's, one of the things they have to come to be at ease with from the moment they're born is to be separated from us. And very little ones have a very high and constant need to be reminded of their connection with us. As children get older, if we can really fill their sense of, bolster up their sense that they are in contact with us and they're in connection with us, they can carry that with them into the day, and that will get them through the day. But early separations, generally, they create an emotional tension which doesn't dissolve without help, without having an opportunity to feel those feelings. And those often show up around starting school with they're heading into an environment they may not be that familiar with, and they're separating from you. It's a big deal, and it's very tricky. In fact, my advice to parents is do some connecting before you get to school, arrive at school, say goodbye with whatever small ritual you might want to use to do that, and leave. Because hanging around hoping your child will get through their upset actually doesn't really work that well. Big upsets at school don't work. It's hard on the teachers. One child upset about leaving their parent reminds other children of their upset about leaving their parent. And before they know where they are, one adult, the teacher, is trying to handle 3 or 4 or 5 upset children. So it's better just to leave and to figure out where you can help your child with feelings about separating from you at another time. So now, in terms of Australia, where I am, is a great time to start paying attention to where your child shows you that they're worried about you leaving, and learning how to sort of sit in that moment with them and have them feel how hard it is to think about being separated from you, and cry out the tears that are there to be cried about separating from you, because you really are relieving their backpack so that it's lighter when they're heading to school. And I'm a really big fan of Hand-in-Hand Parenting's online courses. You can have a chat with me about them, but there's a great one to say goodbye to separation anxiety. They're about 3 hours long, and they will walk you through how to think about and set up the emotional project that is separation. And it's great to do that work before you're on the doorstep of the schoolyard or the classroom. And then what children need passionately and importantly is to play. I sort of knew this theoretically, but I don't think I really understood it until I actually had a child. And she would come in, she would need to play when we'd been out and there hadn't been opportunity for free play. She would come in at the end of a day or an activity where it wasn't, about playing, with an absolutely urgent need to play. It was extraordinary. It was more important than going to the toilet. It was more important than, having any food. It clearly was almost, physical need to start to play out scenarios. It's a part of, I think, probably all of our brains. It kind of gets a little bit rusty as we get older. And one of the challenges for us as parents is to find the playful, which is a bit hard when we're hard up against parenting. But particularly as our young ones head into adolescence, we really need to refine that part of ourselves. But play is really important to young ones. So the American Academy of Pediatricians has said that play is essential to the cognitive, physical, social, and emotional well-being of children and youth. And play is defined as a human right. And in fact, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child speaks really specifically about the importance of adult support for free play. So organised games are fine, but they actually don't allow a child's intelligence to explore the themes that are important to them in the way that they need to and that they will use play to do. And this sort of play is play where children initiate and control and organise the play. And we teach a listening tool called Special Time, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is designed to set up a place regularly in your relationship with your child where you can support that kind of play. Tremendously powerful listening tool, does all sorts of things, but helping to ease your child through a period of transition and reconnect and top up this sense that you are on their side, and then they borrow from that credit that you're putting in the bank through whatever it is they have to handle at school. So as I said earlier, I've come to think about this as backpacks. The school will tell you what lunch to put in and spare clothes and other things. I want to talk about packing it with connection vitamins. And then when they get home, unpacking the emotional waste. So we all have close times in our family where we connect. We have, you know, every family has its rituals of connection. There are times where you feel close, where you enjoy each other's company. For many parents, when I have you in the room and I'll ask people to talk about what it is, you know, what times in their week those moments are, it's often bedtime. Reading books is a common one. And it varies a bit as our kids get older. But those are really important, really, really important. But they're a little bit casual for our children to use them powerfully to top themselves up emotionally. So we teach a listening tool called Special Time, which is an incredibly, it does many, many things, but it's an incredibly efficient way to pack the connection vitamins in your child's backpack. And I would recommend, it's a very flexible tool. There'll be periods of your family life where you need to do a lot. And there'll be other times where you can get away with, things go best when there's a kind of drone of special time. So you might do half an hour a week when things are going smoothly. But when things are rough, you really want to bump up special time to put an extra deposit of connection in the bank as sort of credit to use in the face of more difficult experiences. And special time is a fantastic way to do it. It's very, very efficient. It's one child. Practically, it's usually one parent or one adult and one child. Sometimes it's really, really an extra boost for a child to have at their mercy both, or whoever the, you know, two parents, but whoever the primary carers are together. But each person who has responsibility for a child, a close, responsible relationship with a child, needs to have an independent special time relationship with that child. So doing it together always actually doesn't quite get there. It's useful at times, but it doesn't replace the need for you to really be in touch with your child one-on-one. So in general, it's one child. It's definitely one child. As soon as you've got more than one child, it is not special time. Special time is a time your child does not have to share with anyone else. They have your undivided attention. You are the center of they are the center of your attention. When they're little, actually, you are the center of their attention as well. But it changes a bit as they head towards adolescence. But so one child, set a timer and make it clear that the timer is on. Special time is special because it has a beginning and it has an end. The timer is for both of you. There have been times where I've been doing special time where I just could not hardly wait till the timer went off. And I remember going and buying a really big kitchen timer so that I could see it from anywhere in the living room. So I knew I only had 30 seconds to go. Sometimes our kids want to do stuff that we don't want to do, and that's part of what special time is good for, because it's very time limited. Sometimes we just find what they want to do hard for whatever reason. I knew a mum whose child in special time wanted the mum to run around the block, and she was not fit. So it was hard for her to do. Knowing that she had 3 hours of it just would not have worked, but 10 minutes to give it a go. And sometimes we just have to give things a go. It's our best, we put our best foot forward. It's not a perfect art. But sometimes our kids get into a groove of wanting to play something that just is so boring for us. And they want us in there, interested in what they're doing. And we need a timer to really do that. So we set a timer. The other thing is, oops, I've got a trigger finger today. The other thing about a timer is special time needs to end. Special time builds a child's sense that you're on their side and that they're connected to you. And what that does often is allow them to bring up upsets that have been hanging around. And the end of special time can be a time where a child shows you an upset that they might not have felt safe enough to show you. And anytime you can listen to that upset instead of trying to talk them out of it will make a difference to their capacity to stay in their thinking brain and to function well under the pressure of school. Anyway, we have a timer. We announce it. It turns out that human beings will get more benefit from what we notice. So you can have hung around a child and felt like you've gone their way the whole day. And at the end of the day, they're acting like they didn't even notice you were there. They're acting like they're depleted. Special time helps that because we bring our attention to the fact that it's happening. It helps children notice that we've paid attention. And sometimes it's just good for us because we can say, when we put our head on the pillow at night, I did that for my child. I'm not a natural player. And special time really was the thing that saved the play in our house. I knew it was important. I learned all sorts of things about my daughter from that practice of special time. Because what you want to do is say, I'll do whatever you want to do. And you bring as much extra warmth and eye contact as you can. Laughter is good, but don't tickle. Tickling actually takes control away from a child. So in general, my recommendation is to avoid tickling. There are 100 other great ways to have fun. You will probably do well. The principle is that the child is in charge, and that you really don't want this. This is not a teaching time. This is a time where you're being there with your encouragement and warmth, but you're getting out of your child's way. Adults get in kids' way a lot. We spend a lot of time telling kids what to do, and that's normal and necessary, but they need a break from it, and this is a break from that. And the sense of them being in charge will go better if you can find ways of being less in charge, less competent, less confident than they are. They will just love that. So 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, there's no rule. Particularly if getting up and out in the mornings is an issue, doing a smallish amount of special time can really grease the wheels and make it easier for that process to happen. So it works because it gives children space to tell you what's going on. They can tell that you are really on their side. They build a sense of connection that they borrow from when they're in stressful experiences. What happens is that young people who understand what special time is will find the person they have a special time relationship with when they're in trouble, and they will ask for it. Mum, can we have some special time? So when their connection credits are low, they'll ask for special time instead of, when it works well, instead of hitting their sister, pulling the cat's tail, throwing their peas away, getting hung up on homework. I have to tell you, homework's a whole other issue. So anyway, it empowers children to ask for the help that they need, which is more connection generally when they're in trouble. And we feel better about our parenting. So the other piece is about listening to feelings. So tears are the way that we release grief. Tantrums release frustration, and frustration children experience a lot of frustration as they're learning how to do things. And that feeling needs to be released in order for them to be able to persist until they've mastered something. It's a feeling which is not well understood and is shut down pretty quickly in our culture. I had trouble sort of really understanding, having a sense of what that would feel like until someone said, well, it's how you feel when your computer's not working and you're just about ready to throw it out the window. That's frustration. And that's how our children feel constantly. They're up against it as they're learning how to be in the world, and they need a place to download about it. Tantrums, if you can let them go and hang in there and not get mean and nasty around them, tantrums are short and sharp and fast. They're generally not aimed at you personally. They're just an attempt to get rid of this hideous feeling of frustration. And laughter heals fears. And there's a bunch of other ways children will try to release fears, but laughter's a really powerful one. So we call unpacking the backpack stay listening. So when your child is upset, instead of trying to fix the problem, I mean, there'll be things that you do need to fix. You know, they're hungry, they're hot, they're cold, you know, some physical need that you need to meet. But much of the time, there may be something that needs correcting, but you can take your time sometimes to correct it and because it's a small thing around which your child has found a way to show how they're feeling. So when your child's upset, you're the safety manager. Your job is to make things safe, to move close and to pour in your love. And what happens is they get to pour out their feelings. And as I've said earlier, stopping this process doesn't actually stop the feelings. They just sit there and get in the way of your child really being able to use their thinking brain. So any chance you can get to help them offload the feelings will make a difference. And don't always jump in to fix the problem. Sometimes the problem's emotional. And I'm sure we've all had that experience of our kid getting upset about something and we try to fix it and then that's not right. And we try to fix it and then that's not right. And at some point, after about the third go, I think you need to face that it's the gift of little upsets. It's actually your child looking for a place to offload some feelings. And when they get through those, if you can listen to them without taking it personally, sometimes they will have things to say about you. Those things, if they're saying them in the heat of the moment, those things are not actually aimed at you personally. I think what's happening there is that you are standing in for some big hurt that it's difficult for them to articulate. So listening to that will help. And on the other side of it, notice how your child is. They'll often be in much better humor and sometimes they'll be able to do the thing that they were balking at before. So just to summarize, starting school for you as a parent is about keeping the balance. It's about building connection and filling up their backpack with connection, and you can use special time to do that. You need to provide your child with opportunities for free play, and special time, again, is another place where you can do that. And unpacking the backpack is what you need to do at other times where they're showing you that they're stuck on an upset and wanting to unload. And the listening tool that you could use there is stay listening, which is to get in close, take a warm tone, don't take it personally, and trust that on the other side of it, your child will be able to think better. And then very important is getting support for you. It's really difficult for you to offer your child this kind of emotional support if you don't have any for yourself. For me, walking into the playground, the school ground was like in Australia, we have these playgrounds, old schools. Some of them there's one locally that I saw had a date on it, 1890, that building was built. That kind of building was what I walked into when my daughter started school, and it shot me straight back to my own early schooling, which was really difficult. And I actually found the first period of my daughter's schooling really hard. You'll find an article about it. I think it's called Who's Starting School on my website. I remembered things in that process that I had not remembered, that were really hard on me as a young one, and that I'd managed to avoid I'd not been anywhere near a school ground. Who wants to go back to school until our kids go to school, and then we're there? So you will find quite possibly that your child's challenges in learning and their challenges in the transition to school and in their social challenges, that will give you plenty to work through of your own story. And the challenge is that sometimes our own story is pushing at us so hard, we can't actually tell what's going on for our child. So I found the start of school incredibly anxious making, but I don't think it was that hard for my child. I think a lot of that was about the way it pulled up my own experiences of those years that I had managed to just walk away from. The way our brains work is that we are reminded now of earlier experiences. So, and sometimes that process is really dumb. It's not very sophisticated. So being in a building that looks the same as the building you started school in may have you throw you back to a bunch of big feelings that you managed to avoid because you didn't go anywhere near a school. So be prepared for your own big set of feelings. Around learning, for instance, many of us have stories around learning. And how hard it was to learn things and how frustrating it was. And we were often not well supported through that process. And when our children struggle, we can get very impatient very quickly. So the big thing is getting support for yourself. Making time, as I said, is important. If you can back work, in particular work off, but other commitments for a period around the start of school and leading up to it, I think that's really worth trying to do. Not all of us can manage that, but understanding that it's a time it's quite likely to be a little difficult. And finding someone to listen to you. You're starting school too. That's a fair bit of what I do, is listen to parents. As I said, I run support calls that parents can be part of. And I'm really happy to spend some time with you if you've got some questions about anything to do with parenting. It's my favorite topic. So I think that's about the end of what I have to say. Joshua, was there anything much in the chat?
Thanks for that, Madeline. That's amazing. It's been great to see your presentation and some great tips and everything. We've got one question so far, and feel free, anyone watching, if you want to pop any more questions into the chat. We've got, are there any tips in the event that school does not allow us on site before the beginning of the year? So with pandemic and stuff, and there is uncertainty, of course, with things set to open up in December, but we do not know what will happen in the new year at this stage with the year we've had. So do you have any tips on that, event?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, as in it's going to be harder than it would otherwise be, and expecting that is half the challenge, I think. a lot of the time I'm working with parents around what's your expectation, like our expectations. Difficult things are much easier to handle in my experience if we expect them. So I think this year in particular, expect it to be pretty tough. A lot of special time, allowing time for upsets about having to get to school. There's just going to be more feelings, I think. I didn't say this, but I just as a secret, I am a big fan of the odd day off. And this is naughty probably, but I found that I think that if schools are confident that your child is well cared for, they don't worry. There's a whole lot of legal stuff about giving your kids day off. And I have learned recently that it's got a whole lot more tension on it in the US than it does here, but it's a big deal 5 days a week. And they get exhausted apart from anything else and very depleted in their sense of connection with us. So I'd be planning on reasonably regular days off in the first period. And I think if you're not able to go there at all, whether you can ask the school if they're happy. Many schools won't have the resource for this, but some will. If they're happy to facilitate something where parents who are starting next year can meet in the park for some sort of picnic or something, that may be an option. In general, some schools are set up with some extra resource around the school that helps them facilitate that sort of thing. Often schools are very pressed just to deliver the basics and don't have that sort of slack, but it would be worth asking. And I think kindy teachers and principals would be very aware that it's hard on them when the kids aren't ready. And they probably will be happy to help think about what might be able to be done, but I'd be really trying for that. And then I think two other things. Practice separations. Now, that in my book, that means setting up opportunities for your child to have some feelings about being away from you. It's not about teaching them how to be away from you. They can be away from you when they're not. They can comfortably be away from you and turn their attention to the interesting things that are happening at school if their backpack is not full up to the brim with feelings, and if they can borrow from a deep sense of connection with you, which special time will give them. So you don't need to teach kids much at all. I don't think. You need to furnish them, you need to unload the emotional tension they're carrying and furnish them with a really firm sense of connection. So in the period that you might have before starting school, noticing wherever your child starts to be upset about the prospect of being separated from you, and taking that slowly and not avoiding it. With a plan that your goal is to actually listen. So the way we call it the long goodbye, the way that works is that you start, your goal is to bring your child's attention to the prospect of a separation. I love working around separation because you're better off doing it when you actually don't have to leave. You can do it strategically. So it's hard managing big upsets around separation when you have to get to work by a certain time, and it can get really tight and tense. My advice would be, on a day where you don't have to go to work, set up a potential separation. Tell your child and watch for where they start to get agitated about it. And that's the beginning of the upset. And then what you need to do is just move in warmly. This is stay listening. It's like, I know, honey, I am going to go. You don't actually go. Well, you may have to go. Like what you do is you start with whatever amount of the prospect of separation they helps them get to bump into the feelings about it, and then you stay there. And then when they sort of, it's like they'll have an upset on each little spot, and then it'll seem to have gone away, and then your job is to say, I am going to leave. I know you don't want me to go. I know. And gradually, I remember we did a lot of work around separations. Most kids, you know, it's a big job. You need to take it on. So it's not sitting there waiting to burst when you start school or start kindergarten or start preschool. But most kids will have work to do in this spot. We did a lot of it with my daughter. And I remember that there was a certain point where the thing that would have her come to an understanding and bump into the feelings about of being away from me, I would have to get my car keys. Like, even, I think she was about 18 months, so she was pre-verbal. But at that point, she knew I was going to leave if I got the car keys. And then she would start to have a big cry. I wasn't actually going to go anywhere. We did this mostly on Sunday mornings. It sounds a bit mean, but it's actually just, those are a bundle of feelings you really want to try and get out before you head to school. And taking advantage of those spots in the day where your child starts to show you that they're worried about you leaving and the feelings are up close to the surface, it's worth taking the time at those moments just to stop and listen. The thing about separation is we are inclined to bring a child to us to say, oh, sweetheart, it's okay. It's okay, I'm here. Well, once you do that, they're not feeling the separation anymore. They're with you. So you might need to, you know, you have to figure out how to get it so that they can feel it without actually separating. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. The challenge, it's this little space. When you drop a child at preschool, actually my advice is leave, because hanging around has them preoccupied with the feelings that you're going to leave. But at preschool or school, there's often not much slack for a kid to have an upset. So they're preoccupied with you leaving, and they can't turn their attention to the interesting things that are happening. You're better off just leaving. What you'll find, the preschool will often say, ring up and see how they are. And, you know, 19 times out of 20, you'll ring up and the kid will be fine. They were absolutely heartbroken that you were leaving. And then 5 minutes later, they're fine. What's happened there is that they've got sufficiently little in their emotional backpack that they can pack it away when it's not safe enough to feel it and get on with enjoying what there is to enjoy about preschool. So it's not that the feelings aren't there anymore, but they can manage them. You've moved so far away, they can't actually feel it anymore. So helping a child around the project of separation is about just bringing their attention to the fact that you're going to leave and figuring out where they can be upset about that, where you can kind of hang in there with them. So lots of trial runs. I have to, and good luck is what I say. It's okay. You know, if it's hard, it's hard. It's okay. Drop and leave. There'll be other chances, but you need to expect, I think it'll be much harder this year.
Most definitely. We're faced with a whole new range of challenges. So I certainly don't envy people who are starting this year. I know one of the things I did with and still to this day do with my young bloke who's in year 6 now, I would walk him to school, and even if, and it's not practicable for everyone, but I would, even if I had to drive to school or whatever, I would park a little bit further away and jump out and walk him up to school, and you know, you've got that little bit of a buffer where you can have a conversation and make it kind of fun rather than just drop, see ya. So, I don't know, enjoy.
And doing some special time in the morning so that you've plumped up their sense, even 5 or 10 minutes, that so it just refreshes their sense of connection to you, that they'll be able to borrow from as they get into whatever's going to happen once they get to school is useful. Sometimes I met a mum who's did a lot of work around separation, but nonetheless, the place where her little one wanted to have a monumental ball was right on the doorstep of the classroom. And she said, I could see the teacher getting more and more agitated. It's like, sometimes it doesn't matter what we do, that's the spot where our kid has figured out how to feel it. And sometimes we just have to, we can't, you know. So leaving your kids is fine, you know, taking opportunities where you don't actually have to leave at other times will make a difference. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I guess there's a little bit of time left, and we do have a number of participants online. If you do have any other questions, please do pop them in the chat and I can read them out for Madeline. But if we don't, that's totally fine. It means that Madeline's done an amazing job of it's made it very clear for everyone, and everyone's got some amazing skills and tools in their kit for starting school next year. But I'm happy to check in on some more questions if we have them. Otherwise, there will be a questionnaire coming that will come to your screen once you do log off of the webinar. It'd be appreciated if you could answer that to get a bit of an idea about what you thought about this webinar, if you'd like to see more webinars, or if you know, with things opening up, if we'd like to see some more in-person sort of things, what sort of times work and everything. And as always, do check in on the Randwick City Council website. We do put up lots of different projects and workshops and information that is suitable for young people, children and parents and families. We just have got another question popped in, Madeline. Mm-hmm. Do we have any tips for kids who possibly have ADHD, hyperactivity, or other conditions that might make things add that extra layer of starting school difficult?
Yeah. Having worked in schools, I would say one of the most important things is to be, which hopefully you will already be, but to be in contact with the school, to talk with them about what you understand about your child, so that they're forewarned and they've got the resources, you know, that whatever resources they can organise, you know, that can get organised around your child. Sometimes I don't head people down the path of diagnosis, but within the school system, sometimes that does what I'm not sure about those diagnoses, but sometimes what they do is mean you can get some extra resource. So if the school knows ahead of time, they may be able to get some extra resource that will help with helpers in the classroom that can kind of help ease your child's integration into the school. At hand in hand, we understand the set of behaviours that go with ADHD. We understand those as indicating that a child is carrying a backpack with fear more than other feelings. So the general tone of what they're carrying in their backpack will be to do with fear. Who knows where it's come from? And it's the thing that keeps them moving. It's the thing that makes them agitated. And it's probably more than I can do now to talk in much detail about how to work with children around fear. It's different from, most of us understand about a good cry. Fear is a different kettle of fish, and the general sort of tone of it is that children will need to sort of fight. That's because the fear, generally a feeling of fear has you feeling overwhelmed, and in order to kind of work through that, you need to struggle and to fight. One of the things that I think is particularly, all kids benefit from this, but kids who are particularly have trouble sitting still, rough housing is a fantastic, it's a form of what we call play listening, which is play where children are in charge, but that what you're after is laughter. Laughter is the release of lighter fears, and it's play listening and rough housing, which is physical play where you match your strength to allow the child to be stretched, but to win. So it will vary. You know, rough housing with a 2-year-old is really different from rough housing with a 10-year-old, but it's physical play. There's something about the physical contact that's involved in it. A family wrestle, you know, a nightly family, if you've got a kid who's particularly agitated, a nightly family wrestle where they get to laugh a lot, they'll sweat a bit. Sweating is also the way we release fears, and it's very connecting. Laughter's hugely underrated as a way of releasing fears. So if your child is that way inclined, number one, talk to the school about it. It's a huge relief to schools to know that parents, to have parents' perspectives, and to know that parents understand that there's an issue. So you'll be much more likely to have them as allies if you front up early. But I think lots of rough physical play. Sock wrestles, trying to get each other's socks off, is a great game to play. You'll laugh as well, which is good for you. My daughter's 17, she still challenges me to a wrestle, and I have to laugh. Like, it's a big job for me to be to hang in there. I have to push myself, so it's good for us.
Yeah, I'm just aware of time, but there's two really great questions that I'd love to put to you that have come in the chat, Madeline, and then we'll probably have to leave it there. But thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and thanks for some of the comments that are being made in the chat that I know not everyone can see. But we've got two great questions, so I'd like, if we can cover off both of those, would be fantastic. One is, do we have any tips for separated parents?
Yeah.
Particularly, we know with separated parents there can be a situation where the child is staying with different parents at different times, and this could certainly separate or disrupt the school week. So this is another thing. So if they're starting school at one parent's house and then they're going to another parent's house, and then maybe in the same week they might shift between houses a couple of times. So do you have any ideas, any tips, and should we just keep those routines as is? So if they are staying half a week at one parent and then staying at the half a week at the other, or should we change that?
It's a big deal. It's a big deal. And I think the degree to which you could have it not be a disruption in the middle of the week is probably useful if the changeover can be on the weekend. Just being a separated family is a whole thing in itself. You know, there's obvious things to be said. The more you are in decent communication with the other parent involved, this will be a time where you'll ideally be needing to give each other information about how things are going. That said, in general, it's tricky, and I think it doesn't. Yeah, the less disruption during the week, the better. But in the end, it is what it is. The routine is what it is. And the thing that I think you really need to focus on and it's around separated parenting in general, is the connection and reconnection process, so that when they come to you, you do a really solid bit of special time. Reconnecting with, reconnecting, and expecting a set of upsets as well, which will be about how hard it is on a child to have to transition from one place they're cared about to another place they're cared about, and not have those two places be one. So you've got I'm not telling parents who are in separated, I'm sure I'm not telling you anything, but you're handling both what's happened to the child in the period that that they've been at school, but also the transition from one household to another, and the differences in parenting styles. Children actually can handle an enormous amount of disruption and differences in approaches, so long as they can borrow from a sense of connection, and so long as they have a place where they can download somewhere where they feel about it. So yeah, you've just got an extra layer of work, and that's just what it is.
It is a very difficult situation, and it really does
Yeah.
depend on what that communication is like between the parents as to how much you can really work with that.
Yeah, what I'd say is that even if it's not good, you can do a huge amount in focusing on the importance of reconnection, and then expecting that the upsets that your child sets up, and children set up upsets, that those will be both about their feelings to do with the start of school, but also to do with whatever they're feeling about the transition from one household to the next, or whatever they're bringing in their backpack from the last place they were, So that's your job. That's your job when you're a separated parent. It's an extra piece of work.
Absolutely.
Often. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Madeline. And just one more that I'd like to put to you, just because it is another big question, but mindful of time, of course.
Yeah.
Should we talk to our child starting kindy about bullying, and that it may happen to him? I know schools do a lot of work around this now, but what are your thoughts on having a conversation with the child before starting school?
I think schools do a lot of work around this. And I think if there's any conversation you want to have, it'll be about, and we tend to overemphasize this bit about giving our children information. They generally, what they need is connection and emotional support, and they can handle things if that's what they have. We tend to get worried about trying to protect them from things instead of kind of piecing them back together again. And we do need to protect our kids, but I think if a child has lots of special time where they get to if a child's being bullied, one of the things will be that will show up in special time, that will show up in the games they want to play, the scenarios they want to play out. So with younger children, they won't always be able to articulate that they're being bullied. One of the things we worry about is that we won't be able to help them, or that we won't know that it's happening. And I think special time is your insurance policy, that if there's something really wrong, it will become clear. They'll set up these games where one doll bullies another doll, or they'll want you to be, they'll have scenarios where it's really prescriptive about how you need to behave, and it'll tell you there's something going on. So I think the only conversation I'd want to really have with a young one is, who's going to be your safe person? At school, if you need a safe person, who can you go to? The rest of it, schools are either good at it or not so good at it. And you just need to be keeping tabs on how full your kid's emotional backpack is and what the tone of it is. And both the upsets they choose, but also in particular what they do in special time where you are not setting an agenda, but they are, will tell you whether there's something going on which is difficult. And then I'm a great fan. I think we worry about teaching our kids. A kid who's in good shape, who feels well supported, will either figure it out how to handle it or know how to get help. And your job is to have them well connected and in good shape. And that's what you have control over. You don't really have control over what happens at school. The thing I would say, though, a bit about becoming a school parent is that make friends with your teacher. Introduce yourself. Tell that my policy has always been to tell them that I will come to you with anything except, something extraordinary first. I may need to take it higher, but I will always let you know. But engage with your child's teacher. I've not made an appointment to see a teacher without feeling really anxious the night before, weirdly anxious, that somehow I'm overdoing it, I'm worrying too much, my concerns are silly, they're going to think I'm an idiot. And I've never had a meeting. I've had some meetings with teachers that I've had to kind of push and take further, but I've never had one where I felt like what I was worried about was silly. They have important perspectives to offer. They need to know about, they don't know how it's landing. If your sense is that something's wrong, they may not know, they may not have picked that up. So it's important that you're giving them feedback about how things are. Any struggles your child's having with learning at home are worth communicating with the teacher about. Whether you get much useful from them, I don't know. But what you often get, which I certainly was in this position. I had a child at 41. I'd had almost nothing to do with children. I've got no idea what's developmentally to be expected. And I found that teachers have deep knowledge of what happens with kids at that age. I remember huge dramas in about year 3, social dramas. Apparently that's developmentally to be expected. So that's very helpful. So yeah, make friends with your teacher.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Madeline. Much appreciated. And thanks everyone for your time in attending today. Do fill out the survey and do keep an eye on the Randwick City Council website for future events. And hopefully we can get some in-person things happening sooner rather than later. But once again, thank you very much, Madeline. We'll leave it there at this stage.
Cool.
It's great to draw on your wealth of knowledge and experience, and I'm sure everyone has got some great tools to launch into 2022 in a healthy, positive space.
Yes. Great. And as I said, feel free to get in touch with me. I love to hear from you.
Yes, do use those links. You'll be able to contact myself. An email will be sent out with my email and Madeline's email. So do contact either of us if you need any further info. But thank you very much. Everyone have a wonderful weekend, and yes. We'll talk again soon.
Okay. See you, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.